from Psalm 91. We're looking at the whole Psalm 91, but verse 4 is what we're going to focus on. Psalm 91. Focus on verse 4. If you're using the church app, it's already there for you. The program is being streamed live, so you miss it, you can go back on the app and look at it. Those of you on Facebook Live, it's being streamed live, Facebook as well. Psalm 91:4, he shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. We'd like to reason with you from the thought, the danger of living the uncovered life. The danger of living the uncovered life. Have you ever been through a disaster in your life? Just a few people I see. Yeah. We've been watching the news this week, and we see the various accounts of catastrophes, and we easily empathize with disaster victims in Florida and South Carolina, and we see storms and hurricanes, and we sit there and we can empathize with them because we have endured similar situations. And when we watch the news accounts of, yes, Hurricane Matthew, I don't know what that means for Matthew Williams, but Hurricane Matthew, I'm sure they're teasing him at his house. We hear about that on the East Coast, and then on the West Coast we got fires, and in Middle America we got floods. We often pray for the safety of the residents. And we join relief organizations that have to provide for help, and we send a little money and help out, and we pay close attention because we have been there. And while we watch houses burn, and homes flood, and storms rip off the roofs of buildings and carry them way away from their destination, from their original places to other destinations, one question keeps coming up in our minds. I wonder if they were covered. There are many who have survived storms and floods and disasters with their lives intact and found it easier to recover because they had the forethought of having full coverage, insurance or flood insurance. Some only had partial coverage. Others had no coverage at all. You know, if you buy a new automobile, they won't let you drive it off the lot unless you have full coverage. Now that provides an amount to pay for people when your car tabs somebody else's car. It's enough to take care of theirs, and enough for you to take care at least the how much you owe them, because you know when you drive the car off the lot, it's already lost $2,000 or $3,000 of value. So it's enough to cover that much, and any damages that your car might cause to other people. And there are many homes, however, who risk driving a car and have no coverage at all. And when you jump in the car and you drive and you know that the car don't have no insurance on it, then you run the risk of having your license suspended, or that you might injure somebody else and know you ain't got no money to pay for it, tab somebody else's car or property, and then face court fines, flags on your driving record, and every time you jump in the car and you say, I'm just going around the corner to the store, and somebody else is drunk coming around the corner and hits you on the way, you ain't got no insurance. Didn't you know something? they could have insurance on their car, and they could be at a fault, and they hit you and you ain't got no insurance. Their insurance won't pay you a dime because the law says you got to have coverage, a liability coverage on your car. We found that out in our family the hard way. Brothers and sisters, there are many who buy a home, and when you buy a home, the mortgage company will take some form of insurance out on that loan, enough to be able to pay the cost of that house off, and to make sure that the mortgage is covered. They make sure you pay. They add the taxes to your house note. They add the insurance to your house note, and that's to cover the liability on your property and all of the other things related. But then there's some who ain't got no mortgage, but we run the risk every day of somebody falling down on your land, on your property. We got nice, pretty trees over the top of our houses. No, we ain't got no insurance. Don't take but one little storm to blow that tree right down through your living room. And we ain't got the first piece of homeowners insurance to cover anything. And so every day we run a risk. High waters come through our house, and we've seen it come three or four times, but we still ain't went out and bought no flood insurance yet. Even since March, we knew it wiped us away. We back in now. We still ain't got no flood insurance. And we run the risk every time. Well, it's going to be a long time for it happen again. And we run the risk. Some of us have partial insurance. Some of us have full coverage, and then some have no coverage at all. There are many who have insurance coverages that covers their health and their dental needs. And this ensures that they have access to medical care beyond the emergency room that they may be needed for members of your family. It also reduces the cost of the medicine that you have to buy to sustain your life and to reduce your pain. There are many people, especially young people, who say, well, I'm too young, I ain't gonna get sick. Insurance, medical insurance, that's for old folk. I'm young, I ain't gonna get sick. And so when they go on their job, they say, you want medical insurance? No, I don't want no medical insurance. You can take that later. Do you want life insurance? No, I don't need no life insurance. I ain't finna die yet. It's like everybody that take out life insurance know they finna die. And like you got some date out there that says you're gonna live till you're 75 or 80, you better look at the short graves in the cemetery. So young families take the risk every day of not having insurance in case of death. Some have full coverage, some have partial coverage, some have no coverage at all. Often the reasons for failing to get the proper insurance might be just because we just don't have the money. Full coverage has a high cost to it, and there's not a one-time payment you can pay and pay for it for the rest of your life. It has to be paid every year, and when that high payment stops, boom, the coverage stops as well. Now, if we know that much about insurance, if we know that much about insurance on our house, our car, and everything else, what about our relationship with God? Our relationship with God, in many ways, is like an insurance policy. Our faith does not protect us from storms, but it does provide assurance during storms that after the storm, that our souls will remain connected with heaven, and God's grace will help to put us back together again if we face challenges. Those who have that kind of relationship with God are what is called covered by His grace. There are some in the church who are fully covered. There are some who are partially covered. And there are some who have no coverage at all, even though they sit in the church every Sunday. As Christians, we thank God for our relationship with God. And we thank Him that we are fully covered, and we have the assurance that we have the assurance that He will never leave us alone. But we know that if we fall, He will pick us up again. Now that's better than insurance. It's His assurance that anywhere we go, any time or day, He will never leave us alone, and that He will be with us. Like Motel 6, He'll leave the light on for us anytime. Now, if you are familiar with the 91st Psalm, then you will see basically how that introductory thought I just gave you will sit squarely on the 91st Psalm. For the 91st Psalm is David telling Israel about assurances that they have that during a time of trouble that God would be with them. And of course, it starts off, if you start at verse 1 and go all the way down, it'll talk about he that dwelleth in this secret place of the Most High, and talks about the benefits of being with God. David was a warrior king, and he often faced enemies, and he sought to create an atmosphere of peace in the nation, but he was always at war. And in the course of his reign, there were many threats, there were many droughts, there were many pestilences that faced the people, and the psalm, this 91st Psalm, is a psalm of assurance that the people might rest assured that everything was in control. He wanted everybody to make sure now that he wasn't the one they were going to have their assurance in. They didn't want him to think that the king was going to be the one that gave them the assurance. He kept saying, the Lord is the place where you will get your assurance from. Now, there are many non-denomination churches out there now, and they talk about this idea of covering, and they try to tell you that the preacher is the one you're going to get your covering from. And so you do what the preacher says, even if that happens to be a little bit different from what God tells you. And I'm saying, I ain't telling you nothing about doing what P. Wright said, because you might catch me on a bad day, and I might tell you the wrong thing. You need to listen to what God say. And folk, y'all stop running around all these non-denominational places, because they take these same scriptures and turn around and make it look, and you begin to be a pastor worshiper. And you don't want to be a pastor worshiper. He's a flesh and blood man just like you. He makes mistakes. Don't put him up too high. I try to stay down low so when I fall, I don't have far to go to hit the ground. Well, I don't like people just putting me up there too high. I'll be falling down. When I make a mistake, they say, see there, he supposed to be that. David said, not me. The assurance that you're getting is not coming from me. The assurance that you're getting is coming from the Lord. So in the 4th verse, where our text verse came from, he starts saying that if you get close to God, that he will, and he used 2 figurative pieces there. He said he'll cover you with his feathers, and will put you under his wing. Now, that's kind of like baby eaglets and about a lady chicken. Some of y'all grew up on the farm. Y'all know how them hens do them little bitty chickens. They just get them around. They get them when they cut them and they cuddle them around and they cuddle them around and keep them warm. And you want to mess with somebody, you go try to mess with one of them little baby chickens. That hen will run you out the hen yard. And I suggest to your brothers and sisters that he use that illustration to say he will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust him, and his truth shall be your shield and be your buckler. It will be there to protect you. And so in the remainder of the chapter, if you ever read it when you go home, the believers are promised that those who are covered by him will receive a peculiar attention from heaven, to the extent that God will send angels to protect you. That's the 91st Psalm. That's not Wright talking. It said he will send angels to protect you. And when you fall, will send angels to pick you up again. And when you lose hope, and when you're in despair, and when you're down, he will lift you up. For those who dwell, and the key to it is those who dwell in the secret place. That is, you walk in his way all the time. It's a reminder to those who are faithful that if you continue in him, that he will not let you go. Today, we see Christ as the continuation of that promise. He assures all believers who place their trust in him that he will never leave you alone. But this word covering is used about 3 times in 3 different ways, rather, in the Old Testament of the Bible. The first word is a Greek word, sakach, which means to cover or hedge or protect or join together or defend or set up. It refers to people covering themselves against enemies by staying close together. by being unified. Now, when you ain't unified, you don't have no protection. The devil can find a way in. Even the church, if everybody in the church ain't on the same page, the pastors, the deacons, the members ain't on the same page, the devil finds a way in. And how does the devil find a way in? Because all the devil will show you is everything that's wrong, and he won't let you see everything that's good. And so instead of you praise it and glorify and you sitting around, you mad because this ain't going, because that's what the devil put in your mind. Together, we know we have some problems, but together we can work it out. But when the devil can get in somebody's mind, break you off, splinter you off, and get you to do this, that, and the other, instead of you joining in with everybody, we lose our covering because there's a hole in the covering somewhere. The second Hebrew word is kasach, which means to cover for clothing or secrecy or to conceal. Now that's something about concealing something, because Proverbs 10 and 12 tells us that love covers a multitude of offenses. Do you know when people love you, they don't see nothing wrong with you? When they love you. When they don't like you, they find everything wrong. You ever wonder why she put up with him? Because she loved him. Because she loved him. She can't see it. You see it because you don't love him. But love hides a multitude of sin. It's still there. It's still there. The sin is still there. It ain't gone away, but you just don't want to see it. It covers it up all the time. Now, covered up sin can hide it from other folk, but you don't really hide it from God. And usually the person that you're trying to deal with, they're just overlooking all those flaws and all those shortcomings. That's the way God does us. He looks beyond our faults, and he sees our needs. Third Hebrew word dealing with covering is called kafah. And in King James Version, it means to make atonement. That is, in this instance, we're talking about not covering it up, but we're talking about wiping it out. And it's the word is always associated with the sacrifices that are made, the atonement that is made. And in order to have that type of covering, your sins or whatever you have done wrong are completely wiped out. In the New Testament, Christ becomes our covering. Why? Because he loves us, number one. Even though we ain't doing wrong, he looks beyond our fault. He sees our need. He pulls us together, and then he wipes out our sin and clears our slate. Today, brothers and sisters, there are three thoughts that you ought to consider concerning the coverings. And because these are things that respect to our relationship with God. And there are three levels of covering that ought to claim our attention today. And every time you come to church, you ought to try to get something to put in your pipe to smoke it. It ought to have something with your name on it. And whether you're the drummer, whether you're the musician, whether you're the deacon, or whether you're the man on the camera in the back, whether you work in the TV ministry upstairs, you ought to listen for something that has my name on it. One of these levels I'm finna talk about today involves somebody in this building. You ain't gonna get out of here without one of these levels affecting you. The first level is being outside of the will of God. And if you're outside of the will of God, you have no covering whatsoever. Now, there are many people who intentionally choose to live outside of the will of God. They know the will of God. They know right from wrong. They know what's good and what's bad. They simply choose to ignore God's will and pursue their own course of living. Some of your children and your grandchildren, you done told them what God say. They know what God say. You brought them to church. They've been in church ever since they were children, but they choose not to obey God's will. That means they step from under God's covering on their own. They do it with the full knowledge that I'm stepping out from under God's coverage. I'm going to do it myself. What was Samson's problem? Samson was told, he said, Samson, you're a strong man. And he said, but you under the covering of God, he's given you this mighty power, this mighty strength. Now be obedient to God. Don't go around with Philistine women. Lead these strange women alone. Oh, he said, no, I got to have them. And he stepped out from up under the coverage of God, got in Delilah's arms. She cut his hair off, And because he lost his covering, he also lost his strength, he lost his eyesight, and ultimately lost his life because he stepped from up under the covering of God. Today, there are many like Samson who know God's will, but they choose to risk their soul's salvation with no covering. They're in rebellion against God. Now, so I don't raise my fist against God. I simply say, God told me to do it. I don't care what he say. I ain't doing it. I know I'm supposed to go to church on Sunday. I ain't doing it. I know I'm supposed to give in the offering. I ain't doing it. I know I'm supposed to praise him. I ain't doing it. And so basically, we may not even say those words. We just say, I don't feel like it today. I'll go next time. And basically, that's what it boils down to. We are rebelling. God doesn't like rebellious individuals. Isaiah 31 says, woe to the rebellious children, saith the Lord, that take counsel but not of me, and that cover with a covering but not of my spirit. They may add sin to sin. In essence, if you get out from up under my covering, get up under somebody else's covering, it ain't going to handle you. You got to be up under my covering. And just as many know that they should have coverage for their homes, but they don't. Just as many know that they ought to have coverage for their automobiles, but they don't. And they choose to live and not have it at all. There are many who choose not to be covered. As life's storms come upon them, they try to handle it all without God's help. And even though they ignore God, and that's the way our God is, even though they ignore him, he still offers them an invitation to return home and say, I'm still here waiting. Like the father and the prodigal son, my arms are wide open, waiting for you to come home. Now, that's the first condition, that there are some who are living outside of the will of God, and they therefore are out from under his covering. But the second would be living in his permissive will. Now, these are people who have a partial covering. These are people who are living within his permissive will. Now, there are many who know God, but they have a mixed up understanding about what it means to live in his will. So they do a little bit of what he says. They do portions of what his will is, and they don't do it all the time, even then. For a time, they are partially covered by the grace of God, but they rarely receive his favor. Those who are partially covered, maybe come to church, maybe I'll come, I'm a CME, I come on Christmas, Mother's Day, and Easter, I come on the church anniversary, I come when they feed and have some food or something, and I show my face, and even when I'm here, I pull out my cell phone, and I'm on my cell phone, I ain't watching the broadcast live, I'm playing a game, or I'm on Facebook, talking with people, so I can show my face and look like I can fool him like I'm worshiping him. And I show up, and I don't really have time for this, that, and the other. And I've been told by somebody that if I just give him his praise just every now and then, and it don't matter how I live, so I'm partially covered. Somebody has misinformed me, and God is a faithful God in that He knows that we sometimes may have got it wrong. So his permissive will means that he is allowing you to get some grace and some blessings, giving you some time to straighten it out. So he's permitting some things to happen for you, even though you don't supposed to get it. That's what his permissive will means. He's allowing. So you say, well, I ain't been going to church, but I'm still blessed. I ain't been going to church, but I still got a job. I ain't getting nothing in the offering, but I'm still getting paid every week. I ain't praising him, and I got a new car. I ain't doing all that what them folk doing. Look at me. I got new clothes. I got a new suit, everything. I ain't got to do all that. And we don't understand that it's kind of like God tied a rope around us, and he's letting us out a little rope at a time. He's just letting it out. He's just letting a little bit go, a little bit more. And at some point, what we have to understand is that God's permissive will is not permanent. In essence, it don't go on forever. There is an end to God's permissive will. He's not going to allow you to just go on and on. Well, he's trying to give you enough time to mature, enough time to have learned what it really means, and don't let them folk fool you that all you got to do is just show your face every now and then. and you don't really have to give him your full life and your full commitment, or you can just come to church, even come with two men can come married together, or two women can come married together, or you can come shacking with somebody, and just long as you show your face, that's all right. That's going to last for just so long. He's going to let you hear it so that you'll know. But after a while, God's permissive will and the grace that you're supposed to be receiving and all that favor that you're looking for, it stops. Because he's not going to let you get the same blessing that the others receive, and you're not giving him 100%. God's permissive will is not permanent. It does not last forever. It's like an extension on your insurance policy. And the extension don't last forever. It does run out. Well, there's not being covered at all. Then there's God's permissive will as a partial covering. But then those who are living in the will of God have God's full coverage. Now, I believe there's somebody in this room that has full coverage. I believe there's somebody in the praise team, somebody on the musical instruments, somebody preaching, some deacon, some member. I believe there's somebody in this room that has full coverage. The beauty of the Christian life is that if we live according to God's word, that we are guaranteed full coverage. And the believer who seeks to know God's will and tries to live by it every single day is fully covered in every way. Now, these are the people that David is talking about in the 91st Psalm when he started saying those who dwell in the secret place and those who are trying to obey his will. And he's promising you that he's going to cover you with the feathers of his wings, and he's going to cover you completely and totally. Not just the people who go to church. Remember, everybody who goes to church is not a Christian. Everybody on the Tabernacle church roll is not going to be in heaven. Amen, lights. Just because you joined when you were 6 years old and you lived to be 50, and then they bring you back here and they try to have your funeral in church, you ain't been here in 45 years, we're not going to be able to give you a homegoing service. Because a homegoing service is for the saints. They should have your funeral in the club where you be at every Friday, Saturday night. Folk come and say, he ain't been there in 40 years, but can we have a funeral in the church? No. Take him to the club. Have communion over him. We suggest to you, brothers and sisters, that there are many of you who are trying your best to live according to God's will, and you're abiding in his will. And sometimes you slip it. Sometimes you make a mistake. Sometimes you err. But your heart is there, and you're trying your very best to live according to God's will. And you know something? God knows your heart. And he knows you're trying very hard. The fully covered can say it doesn't matter how the storms blow. It doesn't matter how the heathen rage. God is going to take care of me. And I know God's going to take care of me because Isaiah 41:10 says, "Fear not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will help thee, and I will uphold thee with thy right hand of my righteousness." To be fully covered does not mean that there's not going to be any storms. To be fully covered does not mean that there won't be any strong winds. To be fully covered does not mean that you won't have any trouble in your life. But it does mean that in the storm, you have his assurance that when the storm is over, after the storm, that the sun will rise again. Finally, brothers and sisters, while there are many who are not fully covered, the good news is that the relationship with God can be renewed. There have been times when the insurance that we have on our property has expired, and we have realized that the insurance have been expired. And then we find out that when we look at the policy that we're living on a grace period. The grace period is a little time they give you after the policy expires. And every insurance policy will tell you that, well, you're living on grace right now, but if you can get the payment in, we can restore your policy in just a few days. Before President Obama brought us the Affordable Health Care Act called Obamacare, the law of the land said insurance companies could turn you down if you had a pre-existing condition. If you had a pre-existing condition, they would say, well, you can't get insurance now. You should have had it when it was time. If you discovered that you had cancer, you couldn't buy insurance because you had a pre-existing condition. If you found out that you had a heart problem, you couldn't get insurance because you had a pre-existing condition. You found out if you had a nervous condition or kidney malfunction, you couldn't get coverage because you had a pre-existing condition. But thanks to Obamacare, it doesn't matter what your pre-existing condition may be, that you're given another chance to be covered. Well, when I think about my circumstances in life, I remind myself that there are many things that can't be covered by Obamacare. Well, when the storms of life began to rage, the old timers would put their hands together and then they would start to look up to heaven and they would say, Father, I stretch my hands to thee. No other help I know. If thou withdraw thyself from me, whither shall I go? When they prayed, they didn't go to college, but they were out there on the farm. Somebody would say, oh, Lordy, I need your help. There wasn't any Obamacare, but there was oh, Lordy care. Oh, Lord, I have a pre-existing condition. Oh, Lord, I stayed away for a long time. Can I get covered again? Oh, Lord, I've sinned and ignored all of your rules. Can I be covered again? Oh, Lord, my sins are as scarlet. Can you wash me and make me white as snow? I heard a voice coming from heaven saying, come unto me all ye that are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Somebody said, well, I don't have any money. I can't pay for it. I know it costs something, but because I read in the Bible in Romans 6:23 that the wages of sin is death. But then I heard another voice in heaven say, you didn't read but half of the verse. The other verse says, yes, the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life. You don't need any money because Jesus paid it all. All to him I owe. Sin had left its crimson stain, but he washed. He washed. Oh, he washed it white as snow. He picked up an old rugged cross, carried it up Golgotha's hill, and he died. Yes, he died. But I'm so glad that the payment wasn't made yet, because early Sunday morning, he rose up from the grave with all power in his hand. Ain't God all right? Won't he rock you when you get weary? Won't he wipe tears from your eyes? He's all right. He's all right. He's all right. Get yourself covered. Get yourself covered. And somebody here today is not fully covered. Somebody here today is partially covered. Somebody today has no coverage at all. We offer you today God's full assurance plan. No matter what happens in your life, good or bad, he will never leave you alone. His assurance that if your name shows up in the obituary section tomorrow, You have his assurance that you'll be absent from the body and present from the Lord. You have his assurance that storms may blow in your life, but he will help you to pick it up again. You have his assurance that people might talk about you, but he will be your shield and your buckler. You have his assurance that times might get tough, but he will provide for you. You need to